grade 8s, welcome to chapter 1. It's actually kind of a pseudo chapter, not a real chapter. It's some review, which I think is pretty important. We need to talk about integers, people. If I could give you one skill that you just mastered, it would be integers. Boy, you'd be able to do a lot of great questions in grade 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 if you could do your integers, multiplying, dividing, adding, subtracting. Unfortunately, it seems to be something that students really struggle with. So I'm going to review it here, and I'm really hoping that this will help, because I kind of have to expect that you know how to do this. It was part of the grade 7 curriculum, and you're supposed to know how to do it. Of course, if you have troubles, you come and talk to me, and I'll help you out. But I'll say again, the sooner and the better that you can learn your integers, it's really going to make your high school math life a lot easier. All right, so what are integers? Well, here's our number line, right? And I know you've seen this before, but I'm just going to do it again. We've got our beautiful number 0 in the middle. And what do we call all these numbers up here? These are all positive numbers. Not sure why my computer's doing that when I'm writing. That's annoying. And down here we have negative numbers. We know that because they have the negative sign in front of all the numbers, right? And remember that the numbers to the left down here, as we go further and further to the left, these are smaller numbers. And as we go further to the right, up this way, these are bigger numbers up here. Gosh, that's really annoying. I'll get that fixed for the next video, I promise. So how does this relate to integers? Well, integers are all the numbers you see here on this number line. -5, -4, -3, all the way up. Nothing in between them though. Nothing in between, but it also goes down forever and up forever, right? You know this. The number line doesn't stop here, does it? It doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and then stop. It keeps going. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. How far does it go? Infinity. Goes on forever. Same this way. -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7, -8. It keeps going on and on and on and on. So here's your integers right here. You see these dots right here? That means continues on forever. It looks just like the number line, doesn't it? It really does, and those are the integers. It includes all the whole numbers. Whole numbers are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and also their opposites. The opposite of 1 is -1. The opposite of 2 is -2. The opposite of 3 is -3, etc. Opposite of 0, still 0. So sometimes people think integers are just the negative numbers, but it's not. It's these negative numbers and these positive numbers and 0 itself. So what does integers not include? It doesn't include the numbers in between. No fractions, no decimals. So things like -1.6, that's not an integer. I know you see that negative and you think, oh, it's an integer because it's negative. No, it has to be like a whole number or the opposite. 2/3, nope. -2/3, nope. Can't be a decimal, can't be a fraction. Alright, so our job today is to learn how to multiply integers. I'm sure that many of you already know how to do this. So what we're going to do here is a question, +3 times +2. Now come on, this is, going back a ways here. But I want to introduce you to this idea that when you multiply, it's kind of like you have groups of. So +3 times +2 is like 3 groups of 2. 3 groups of +2, in fact. So it's kind of like you have +2, which I could write like this, plus, there's a group of +2. Here's another group of +2, and here's another group of +2. So how many positives do I have in total? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. My answer is +6. And that shouldn't be a surprise. You've known this for years, that 3 times 2 is 6. +3 times +2 is +6. So what happens when you multiply two positives together? You get a positive. The answer will be positive. That's the way it was back in grade 2 or 3 or whenever you learned multiplication, and it's still that way. Now, what about if you have a positive times a negative? Well, in this case, you have +3 times -2. That means 3 groups of -2. So what would that look like? Well, here's one group of -2. Here's another group of -2. And here's a third group of -2. We have 3 groups of -2. So how many do we have total? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 negatives. Our answer is -6. So when you multiply a positive times a negative, you end up with a negative answer. Now this is also the same if you multiply a negative times a positive. Order doesn't matter when you multiply. So if you have one positive and one negative, you're always going to get a negative answer. Okay, then we get to the two negatives. Now this is a hard one to model. So here's one way you can think of it. When I put three groups of positive 2 here, it's kind of like you're introducing three groups of positive 2. So I'm just going to add that word here. We're introducing, or we're adding three groups of positive 2, but the word adding has double meaning that confuses people. So again, here we're introducing three groups of negative 2. But if the first number is negative, you're actually removing. You're removing three groups this time. So this negative here means you're removing three groups of negative 2. Now how are we going to do that? How are we going to remove three groups of negative 2? Well, here's what we do. I know this is weird, and don't worry if this confuses you. I'm never going to test you on this or anything. I'm just hoping this might help a few people. I want to be able to remove three groups of negative 2. I want to be able to remove this group of negative 2, this group of negative 2, and this group of negative 2. I want to start with nothing. Well, what about if I put down a minus and a plus, and 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 a minus and a plus? Do you see that really what I now have staring me in the face, like all of this together, it's actually nothing, right? This here is nothing. A negative and a positive cancel out, give you nothing. This is nothing, this is nothing, this is nothing, this is nothing, and this is nothing. I actually have represented right here with all these pluses and minus, I have like the number 0 represented here. Again, I know this is confusing, but we started in this previous question with nothing and introduced three groups of negative 2. Now we're starting with nothing. I know there's a different sort of look in nothing, but we have nothing here, and we're going to remove three groups of negative 2. So I'm going to remove this group of negative 2. That's gone now. I'm going to remove this group of negative 2. I'm going to remove this group of negative 2. Well, what's left once I've removed those groups? I'm left with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 positives. Positives. We ended up with positive 6. When you multiply a negative times a negative, you actually end up with a positive answer. All right, I'm sorry. I'm sure this model here made you all confused, but the idea is, and I'm sure you already knew this, two negatives make a positive. So let's summarize. Here's the classic. Positive times a positive equals a positive. A positive times a negative equals a negative. A negative times a positive equals a negative as well. And a negative times a negative equals a positive. Basically, if the signs are the same, right? If you have the same sign, like plus plus and minus minus, you get a positive sign. If the signs are different, you end up with a negative sign. All right, let's try a few questions. Negative times negative. If there's nothing in between, it means multiplying, right? You're probably used to seeing times sign, and you'll still see that sometimes. But as you get into high school, we often leave off the signs. And if you don't have anything between two numbers, it means multiply. So we're multiplying negative 4 times negative 3. Negative times a negative. Well, it's that bottom case right here. It's going to be positive. So if you want, you can put plus. Or, of course, if it's positive, you don't need to put anything. You could just leave that blank. And 4 times 3 is 12. Next one. Negative times positive. That is this case right here. And negative times positive is negative, so you need to put that this time. And 5 times 2 is 10. Next one. Positive times positive. That's the top one. It's going to be positive. You don't need to put the positive. You can if you want. 8 times 3 is 24. Next one. Positive times negative. That's the second one. Positive times negative is a negative. So we have to put a negative. And 10 times 4 is 40. Alright, those are your basics. Let's get to some harder stuff. Whoa, what's happening here? A negative times a negative times a negative. Well, let's take this 2 at a time. If we go a negative times a negative, what do we get? We get a positive. And then if you go positive times this last negative, you get a negative. So this answer should be negative. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. So that's your answer. Okay, let's try this one. Negative 2 times 3. Well, if it just says 3, it means positive 3, doesn't it? So a negative times a positive is a negative. And then a negative times another positive. So again, it's one negative, one positive. It's also negative. So our final answer is going to be negative. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 4, 24. Negative times negative is a positive. And positive times positive is still positive. So you can put positive down if you want. You don't need to. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 4 is 24. Just like we got in the last one. Except this time it's positive. Negative times a negative is a positive. And a positive times a negative is a negative. So again, we get negative 24. Okay, we'd like to come up with a rule, wouldn't we, about whether an answer is going to be positive or negative. And as many of you already know, it has to do with how many of these negative signs you see. So if you have no negative signs, like this question here, there's no negatives, our answer is positive. If there's one negative, like this one, it's negative. If there's two negatives, like this one, it's positive. If there's three negatives, like this one, it's negative. Let's summarize. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, 0. If there's no negatives, so when there was no negatives, remember, it was positive. When there was one negative, it was negative. When there was two negatives, it was positive. When there was three negatives, it was negative. See what's happening? It's just alternating. If there's four negatives, it's going to be positive. If there's five negatives, it's going to be negative. So what's the rule here? The ones that are negative are 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Hey, what kind of numbers are those? Those are odd numbers. If there's an odd number of negative signs, it will be negative. If there's an even number of negative signs, or no negative signs, I guess I should have put, if there's no negative signs at all, the answer will be positive. So let's figure this one out. Is it going to be positive or negative? We have 1, 2, 3 negatives. 3 is an odd number, so this answer is going to be negative. We know the answer is negative. It is negative. Negative what? 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 3 is 18. Our answer is negative 18. Okay, how about this one? How many negatives do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 negatives. So 4 negatives. 4 is even, which means our answer is positive. So you can put the plus sign in if you want. You don't need to. Let's multiply. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. 24 times 1 is still 24. Our answer is positive 24. And that's it. That's multiplying integers, everyone. I hope that rings a few bells and you remember that. And if you have any troubles, you just let me know. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon.